Hello, I'm your host, Giselle Gamby, and this is the Intuitive Pull podcast. First of all, I want to say thank you to the community of listeners because there have been breathtaking ripples that have occurred from listening to this podcast, and I'm excited to be witness of many, many more. This year, I'm dedicating this podcast to the theme of 2023 being a breakthrough year. No matter how successful, fulfilled, and happy we are, and the truth is that sometimes we're not, we all have thresholds we've placed on ourselves on how loving and powerful we've allowed ourselves to be. Following the intuitive pull does not negate our vulnerabilities and our humanness. Oftentimes, following the intuitive pull asks us to see our blind spots and to bring what has been in the shadow to light. And when we do, we can see that being fully human is in fact the precursor to remembering that we are infinitely greater than this mortal body, that we are infinitely connected beyond this time and space, not in spite of our humanity, but because of the intricate weaving of all aspects of our precious humanity. When we take responsibility and remember that you have the power to decide what you choose, and we fuse that with a letting go of control and surrendering into the plans that you didn't make, there is nothing that you cannot transform. My wish is that you see that the deeper you go, the greater your wealth in all ways, and that authenticity is always profitable. Have fun! Hello, beautiful listeners. It's wonderful to be with you here on this Friday afternoon. This podcast episode is inspired by an experience that I had yesterday, or actually two experiences that I had. And I'm just going to say, have you ever had the feeling that things happen overnight and you wake up and you just know that you have to do something? You just have to move with this thing that's in the air. And that was my experience yesterday morning. So I want to share a few things. And of course, as I share, my intention is that this will speak to your heart. So let me start with a dream that I had yesterday morning from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. The reason why I know that it was that timing was because I woke up several times. I looked at the clock, and then when I went back to sleep, the dream continued. And I know that dreams, for me, are very telling. When I have pulled out the information from certain dreams, there have been quite massive transformations that have happened. And so I am very curious about my dream state. And often when we go on retreat, my dreams are very alive and often feed what we do the next morning. So again, my intention is that as I share my dream with you and my experience following that dream, that this will also feed you. So from 3 till 7 a.m. yesterday morning, Thursday morning, I had a dream that my dad, who passed 12 years ago, was creating the most magnificent concert for my mum. And mum and dad love classical music, and I can get into it too. And I walked into the concert hall, and the music that was being played that my dad orchestrated went so into my heart that it almost overwhelmed me with the beauty that I could feel of the music in my heart. And I can't tell you exactly how I knew this, but I knew that Dad's intention of playing that music was to call Mum home. And that's a little difficult to share that, holding myself together. When I knew that intention and I knew the purpose of the concert, I wanted to go and tell her, but for some reason, I can't remember exactly why, I was told to keep it a secret. And then before Mum could hear the music, she died. So as you can imagine, this dream that I kept going in and out of upon waking and then going back to sleep, it was quite a disturbing one, and one that I obviously couldn't shake even when I went back to sleep. And then I woke up at 7 a.m. and I was aware of that dream, but my thoughts instantly went over to an experience that I had the day before that was a very curious experience that I couldn't understand at that time anyway, why I had that experience, what the purpose of it was, until I presenced it yesterday morning. So the day before, I had a discovery call with a cancer patient that had been referred to me. And it was such a confusing call because even from the moment that I said, "Hi, it's Giselle," and the response that I got, it almost felt like I had the wrong number. And I had to check in, is this such and such? Is this such and such? The response that I had from the lady was that it felt like she didn't want to take my call, yet she was the one to invite the call. It felt like I was pulling teeth. There was little that I was receiving from her. There wasn't a lot of generosity in sharing. And yet I could read what was going on, and from the little sharing that she did give me. And then I asked her the question, and it was interesting because when I asked her the question, I actually received the answer. I asked her the question, if your life was a book title, what would it say? If your life was a book title, what would it say? And she replied with the word misery. And I had, as I said, immediately received an answer, and the answer was no man's land, to which I shared with her. I just felt no will to live, no will to live, no will to be even on that call. An intuition arrived, and I was cautious about sharing it. But I know that, given permission, which I did have permission, that I would share it. And so I asked if I could share something a little provocative or a lot provocative, and she said yes. And I said, does she think that she has created cancer in her life as an exit strategy? Because what I sensed was a gargantuan depth of unacknowledged grief within her. And, from the little that she told me, and with that unacknowledged grief sitting inside of her, and also a lot of aloneness, I couldn't touch any will to live. And so when I shared that with her, she said yes. And even in her sharing, her response was lifeless. And really there was nothing else for me to do on that call. So I was disturbed by that call, as you can imagine. And when I woke up at 7 o'clock in the morning after having that dream, the first question I asked myself in reflection of that discovery call the day before was, where have I not fully chosen to live? And what have I not fully chosen to give life to? And I came back to the dream. So you can see there's this weaving of experiences that I was actually, whilst it sounds morbid on one hand, I was actually really reveling in the convergence that was arriving. And so I went back to the dream after asking myself the question, and I acknowledged something that I have been charged with in the last month. I've been charged with this mission. In fact, I feel like I've been demanded. I feel like I don't actually have a choice to say yes, that it just is. And I've been charged with a mission to fully embrace my multidimensional self and to invite other people to fully embrace their own multidimensional selves. Now, you can see that the dream state is such a creative and intuitive space for me, and has been for many years now, that it is a place where my multidimensional self comes alive, actually, when I'm asleep. Amazing, isn't that? And when I was charged with this mission, I'll give you a little bit more detail. The mission is to make this, I call it the space in between. So there's space in between myself and reality. This space in between, this invisible space, this invisible field that I live from, which is a space of presence and knowingness, which is a field where I let go of control, where I surrender, where I follow the intuitive pulls, which is what I was doing yesterday morning in bed, making all these connections. It's a space that exists outside of one of my favorite Rumi quotes, which is, "Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field." Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. And that's where I meet myself. I meet myself, not my little self, although my little self can be held in that space too, absolutely. And my little self can be loved and held and forgiven and have compassion for and be loved, essentially. And it's also a space for the bigger version of myself, where I touch into my knowingness, as I said, where I let go of control, where I surrender, where I do see my blind spots and my thresholds, which I've spoken about on quite a few of these episodes this year, with the theme of this year being a breakthrough year. And this field is a field or a space where miracles are seated. This field is a space where the holding premise of this year, that love has bigger plans than the plans we've made for ourselves, this invisible space, this space in between myself and reality, is fed by this premise, by this knowing that love always has bigger plans than the plans we've made for ourselves. In fact, we don't have the capacity to foresee what love wishes to unfold on our behalf. We don't have the capacity for that. And you know what? That's kind of the fun bit of being a human, is to see the things as they unfold that we could never have expected prior to seeing them. And so the reason why I've been commanded and demanded to make this field a field where not only I meet myself, but a field to invite other people into, is because this is a field of infinite possibility, of creativity and self-expression, and self-expression beyond the self-expression that we have experienced of ourselves. It's a field where our leadership and our expansion and our transformation transcends linear time, transcends space, and transcends doingness. It's a very, very efficient space. There's a beautiful thing that my coach often says, and that is that God loves speed. This is the place where we meet and experience the idea and the truth that God loves speed. This field of infinite consciousness is what our own limitations and our own sufferings, and not only our own limitations and our own sufferings, but the world's limitations and the world's suffering. This field of infinite consciousness is what is required to transcend these limitations and sufferings. Because there is no freedom in the world of judgment, and there is no freedom in the world that orientates only from our physical human form. I've tried that. I've done that. And it's, if we only orientate from our physical human form in denial of the infinite consciousness that is who we really are, then we can only expect a reality that goes around and around and around. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. Sometimes we're free, sometimes we're not. Sometimes we have peace, sometimes we have chaos, and then peace and chaos. That's not what our life is destined to be, unless we choose that. Our life is destined to be one of joy and freedom and connection with ourselves and each other and life, of meaning, of purpose, of the stuff that really matters. And if we are on that treadmill of chaos and peace and chaos and peace, or success and failure, then we don't have time to give our energy to the stuff that really matters. We don't have time and space to experience the stuff that really matters. So I don't know if you can feel the energy within me, but I feel like I've got a bullet train going through me to make this invisible space, this space in between, this space from which my dream and information came from, this space that I'm making connections from, that very peculiar discovery call, and asking myself, where have I not chosen to fully live? And what have I not fully chosen to give life to? Without this space of presence, without this ability to make connections and to see the whole picture that's wanting to be seen, what happens? We don't rise. We don't experience true freedom. And as I said, we don't have the space to care and to realize about the stuff that really matters. Now, that expression, the stuff that really matters, if you've listened to some previous episodes, where that arrived from was by working with another cancer patient. And unfortunately, she passed. And yet the work that we did was about the stuff that really mattered. I'll never forget a conversation I had with her as she called me from a doctor's office in Mexico as she was trying some treatment because her radiotherapy and chemotherapy didn't work. In fact, her body rejected that. And she called me and she said, I just had a conversation with my mother, who she hadn't seen for 2.5 years because of COVID and because her mother was in a nursing home and they lived in different cities. And her relationship with her mother was extremely strained. And yet she had this conversation with her mother. And she said, and this is quite a woman, you know, she had a very big career and a very left brain woman. And she said to me, Giselle, I have never experienced love and I've never experienced light as I experienced in that conversation. And words were not sufficing the feeling and the ability to express what actually happened in that room. But it was everything. And we didn't know that at the time, but that is what needed to be experienced by her and also needed to be completed with her mum. So this was a woman who had very, very serious cancer, and she committed to working with me for 1 year. She put the stuff that really matters as her priority because she didn't know if she would have the luxury of time on her hands. And so that's what happened. And I feel complete that what was meant to happen, the importance of her life that she needed to face into, she faced into, and she left in peace. Now, we don't need death, although often death catalyzes these questions, these bigger questions. We don't need death to ask ourselves, is my life about the stuff that really matters? We don't need death to ask ourselves, am I fully showing up? Have I fully chosen to live? Have I fully chosen to be of service to the greatest and the grandest version of me? And I feel like I'm really being charged here actually to say that. Please do not wait till death or to someone's death for you to ask those questions. I'm giving you, if you already have not asked those questions, I'm giving you that opportunity right now. And I thank the lady who I had that discovery call, because at this point anyway, she has not been able to ask herself that question. So back to my own questioning, where have I not fully chosen to live, and what have I not fully chosen to give life to? Interesting, when I asked myself that question, it's kind of paradoxical, the answer that I got. Whilst I've been commanded to make this invisible inner space of consciousness, this state of being explicit, particularly with those who are in positions of influence, whilst I have been demanded to place this field of consciousness on stage and to make it fully visible, and whilst I've been invoked to make this the main act, particularly with those who can't help but care about the stuff that really matters, because their hearts are so big and because their vision is beyond this world, despite even seeing a new container to bring this to life that makes this work explicit, with a new program called Sacred Leadership, Your Own Inner PhD, I have hesitated. I've resisted. I've put some focus. Actually, I've put a lot of focus here already. I'm not going to lie. I've put a lot of focus here and a lot of energy, and I've given this a lot of love. And I've written about it. I've podcasted about it. I've contacted several people about it. I have booked a room at the Q station in Manly, Sydney, 2 days, I should say, every quarter, over a year. I've also held back. It's like 60% of me has moved with this command and this demand, and 40% of me has not and has held back. And why is that? I asked myself that question yesterday. Well, what I know is that when we are charged or we are intuitively pulled to something that is greater than who we've known ourselves to be to date, and feels like it has a really significant nature to it, that it's really important, because this feels really important. It feels really important. Our ego and our stories can come up because it's a risk, isn't it? I haven't, in this form, facilitated a program specifically to make this internal state of being explicit. Of course, we work with this internal space every day, but I've not yet been charged to make this internal state explicit with people who are in positions of influence and who care about the stuff that really matters. I've not ever been so deliberate and direct, and I haven't ever facilitated in this format. So of course there's some unknown there. Of course I don't know what's going to happen. Of course. And so, yeah, there's a vulnerability there. And that vulnerability had me stand back a little bit and distract myself with other things going on with clients and family stuff. And if I go back to the dream, there was a key point in that dream. And that was, I so wanted to tell Mum that Dad was calling her through that music, yet somehow was told to keep it a secret. So there must be something inside of myself that sits in my psyche that says, you can't be overt, you can't be visible or as visible in your multidimensional nature. You have to kind of keep it under wraps. That happens to us all in our own ways. And the closer we get, and I really feel that some people are going to This is going to be an aha moment for some people. The closer we get to being in the freest expression of ourselves, the closer we get to being in the most authentic expression and essence of ourselves, the more we find distractions, or the more distractions find us. The more we feel like we have to keep it undercover. The more we feel like we have to hold back. We had a group call today, and one of the participants messaged me beforehand and said, I don't really want to come to the group call this morning because I'm really angry, I'm frustrated, I'm fucked off, I don't know what's going on. My joy's feels like it's been ripped outside of me since Monday. And I said, fantastic, great. Come to the call as you are. Wonderful. Come with an intention, though, that you'll experience freedom. And so he came to the call, and the story was, without going into all the specifics, actually, I won't even go into the story. I'll go into the energy of what was underneath that anger. And what was underneath that anger was a complete fear that should he put himself out there, that these were the exact words that he used, I'm putting myself on the line. I'm setting myself up to be rejected. I've set myself up to have insignificance replayed again. And there you go, right? This gentleman originally put this thing out there in the world, and let me use the words that he used to me. So now we're through to the other side, right? He's realized what was really going on, why the anger, why the frustration. Like, we did have a bit of a laugh because he just wanted to give it all up. So he understood that it was, he was setting himself up for rejection. He was setting himself up to have insignificance replayed. And he felt those feelings, and he had compassion for himself, and he went to a place of self-love. It was a very, very beautiful experience. And then I said, answer these questions. Answer, I deeply care for me, ... And he said, I deeply care for me. That's why I move through this life with no stone unturned. And I won't be done until I've completed my mission. And then I asked him the question, or started with a statement. I said, answer this. I deeply care for you. That's why I ... And he said, I deeply care for you. That's why when the shit hits the fan, I go first, so I can even be of more service. And so if we hadn't gone into that space in between himself and reality, he wouldn't have come to see what was lying in the shadows. He wouldn't have come to see the threshold that he had placed on himself, even though he chose this year and has been experiencing his capacity at a much greater level. He wouldn't have remembered about the stuff that he really cares for. And so the taller you stand, the more our response is to brace ourselves. And so that's what happened with me. I was commanded and demanded. And yes, I took action. I took a lot of action from joy. And then I stopped, and I hesitated, and I resisted, and I braced myself. Until I didn't any longer, because I saw what I was doing. And in the spirit of sacred leadership, which is this new program that I am putting out there now, because I've been demanded and commanded to be explicit about the space in between, yesterday I realized that my sacred leadership lay with my family, with the information that came through to me and the information that I'll pass on to Mum, and the space that I'm holding, because I've seen into the invisible. And so just be reminded that the taller we stand, you'll find a million stories to say no. And as demonstrated by myself and by the gentleman this morning, will equally have the opportunity to repose those stories and identities and to risk ourselves in the name of love and to truly know through our lived experience that love indeed has greater plans than the plans we could ever make for ourselves. So allow this episode for your soul to come undone. I heard that expression this week and I just love it. For your soul to come undone. Allow this episode to have you surrender and let go and to risk yourself in the name of love, even though you don't know how it's all going to pan out. Let me remind you that seeing the unfolding is what is wondrous and so joyful, because we would never have the capacity to see that ahead of time. And isn't the mystery of life one of the most precious gifts that we've been given in this human form? If you would like details of the Sacred Leadership Program for those people in Australia, send me a message. If you're not in Australia and this episode has spoken to you and this demand and command of being in your own sacred leadership has spoken to you, we can coach. We'll just do it through a different form. Thank you for listening. Hey guys, if you love this podcast, I have 2 requests. Number 1, sign up to the newsletter, which you can find in the show notes. Sharing is one of my superpowers, and there is only so much that I can share through the medium of podcasting. And I have very big plans this year to be radically generous to you. So sign up to that newsletter where you'll be able to receive a whole lot more that I trust will be super valuable to you. And number 2, I'm a massive referrer of the people I love to the people I love. Please share this episode or podcast with the people you love, and let's create some more breathtaking ripples of impact.